So hello everyone, my name is Órna Murray, and today I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about Women in Sports Matter, a new perspective on women in sports. So just on the outset, to kind of set the tone for the afternoon or evening if you're watching it in the evening time, this is very much like a conversation. It's a start point for having your own conversations and for kind of diving into this area. And I would ask that you kind of keep an open mind. Some of these ideas might be new, some of them you might have heard of before, but just to hold off until the end to see whether or not anything resonates with you or whether anything is there that you feel you might be able to use in your own work. This is very much based on kind of like a team. So I suppose today here we have the athletes, we have some coaches, we might have some parents, we might have some siblings, so there is a team around all athletes, and I suppose this webinar is for everyone. And I suppose a big welcome to any male coaches, any male athletes, any brothers, boyfriends, fathers. This is very much a co-education, and maybe I should have said that, I suppose, even on the header of, it is women in sports, but it is for everybody, because everyone can really benefit from this. I suppose half the population are women. So even if you are a man, you have a lot of women in your life. So it's something that can really benefit everybody. But yeah, we'll fire ahead and get started. So my own name is Órna Murray, and I specialise in psychology, particularly health psychology. And for anyone who doesn't know what that is, we kind of are concerned with understanding psychological, behavioural and cultural factors that affect behaviour. So to kind of break that down, it's the environment, it's our support systems, it's the individual in their own world. We kind of look at how they're supported and then their behaviours based upon that. That's kind of my own background. I always thought I was going to be in sports psychology, but really this is an emerging area that can actually have a lot of influence in how we structure things, and I suppose how we treat each other as athletes, as coaches, and how we can kind of get the best out of everybody. I've done a lot of research in sports science. I was working with a company called Orco, and we were working with elite female athletes, trying to get the best out of them, reduce their days lost to training. And a lot of the information there, I suppose, was quite fundamental in what I believe every female athlete needs to know to get the very best out of themselves, regardless of what level you're at. So even if you're just turning up 2 or 3 times a week to enjoy yourself and to have fun, or if you're someone who's really looking to get the best out of yourself, I really think that this information that at the moment is still at the elite level, and that's kind of the only people who are accessing it. I kind of want to bring it down to more the mainstream health conversation, so everyone has a good understanding of where we're at with the research and how you can use that in your daily life without too much hassle. I was also in my late teens, early 20s, an international cross-country runner, and that gave me a lot of personal experience of how different environments can kind of help or hinder us as an athlete. And what you think you might really need in an environment isn't always what actually best serves you. And I've run with 3 different college teams, and I've had my club team, and I've run nationally for Ireland, and I suppose experiencing those different setups really gave me a good experience of what it's like to be a female athlete with these different kinds of supports. And then I suppose I can also really empathize with younger athletes not wanting to have this conversation around being a woman and around being a female athlete. Like, I really get that, and I can really feel it. So my goal today is to kind of have an open space, a clear space, kind of get rid of any awkwardness or whatever you might be coming with here today, or maybe you don't have any of that and you're really interested and excited to learn more. So whoever, whatever background you're coming from, you're really welcome, and I hope that you kind of get something from today that you can bring with you. If you do have actually also a paper and pen to jot down any ideas that might pop up or any spin-off ideas. No matter how good or bad a webinar is, we always tend to forget a lot of the information. So just jot down quick ideas throughout can really kind of, I suppose, means that you get the most out of this webinar and hopefully can help you into the future. So we will crack on. Our agenda today, so this is very loose. We'll kind of see where the conversation goes. I'm very aware that it's a one-way conversation. I would love if we could have done it live, and I would be able to kind of get your feedback and some real life questions and kind of have it more of a conversation, because I know there's a lot of experience and expertise in this group, because we have a lot of coaches here. We have a lot of athletes who have had their own experiences in systems and kind of training by themselves. And, you know, there is a lot of expertise here. So this is what I'm going to try to talk through today. And again, you know, I am so open to feedback, to questions that you guys might have. So if there's something that I haven't really fully addressed, jot it down and get in contact with me afterwards. Send me an email. I'd be more than happy to answer any follow-up questions. We're going to be talking about women in sports matter, female physiology. So that's just kind of like the female body. We're going to be breaking down the menstrual cycle. So it's, you know, it's not a biology lesson, but we'll hopefully, if you've no knowledge of kind of what goes on and how a woman experiences this, especially in athletics, this will hopefully be a really good like introduction. And you know, we won't get too into the nitty-gritty, but you know, we'll give you a good overview. We're going to be talking about some nutrition, lifestyle, and different supports that you can use to get the very best out of yourselves, that aren't expensive, that are very easy to use. And then what's next? So we'll be kind of looking towards the future as to where I hope this conversation will go and how it will benefit coaches and athletes themselves. So yeah, I wanted to start with this quote because, you know, everyone loves a quote, but those who say they can and those who say they can't are both usually right. And this is very reflective of women in sports. So like only 50 or 60 years ago were women actually allowed to enter in the Boston Marathon. There was a very famous story that came out there. And a lot has changed in those 50 and 60 years. But what hasn't really kept up is how we visually see women in sports. And that's where things like the 2020 campaign are just crucial to visually seeing different types of athletes, to, you know, seeing different types of bodies, to getting used to seeing women training hard and performing and enjoying themselves. And it's funny, if we don't see something, we don't think it's possible. You know, you see that with the 4-minute mile. Nobody could run a 4-minute mile. They said it was physically impossible. And then one person ran a 4-minute mile, and then suddenly everyone was doing it. So we see the more women we have on our televisions, on our social medias, like, then they're influencing the next generation. So the next generation think that it's very normal and that it's very achievable. And that's the whole goal behind the visual, the representation. To set a little bit of context, and something that I think has maybe stunted or kind of hindered the progression of women in sports is that only 4% of sports science and medical research has actually specifically been on women. So that's quite a startling figure. And what has happened up to now is a lot of research is done on men and then just applied to women. This was back historically because it was easier, it was cheaper to do it on men. They didn't have any hormonal fluctuations. So the best practice was just do it on men, it's easier. But what we see is actually a pretty big gap in our understanding of how the female body works and responds to different things. And that has really begun to change in the past 20 or 30 years. But it, again, and that's what I said earlier, it hasn't really trickled down to the mainstream health conversation. And that's what I want to share with you guys, that the research is there, but there's a whole conversation that needs to happen. We can't just have the research and then bring it in to our training. You know, it takes a little bit of time, and that's okay. You know, these things do take time. And one of the other things that is really has a big influence on women in sports is this thing called second generation gender bias. So big word, sounds like a lot. I'll kind of break it down. So it's basically where we subconsciously encourage boys more so than we do girls. Boys get rewarded a little bit more socially for being sporty, you know, for training hard than girls do, particularly when they're younger. And we see kind of the first big, as the statistical showing that we see of this is when the girls and boys come into the junior cert. Up to kind of the ages of around 12, we see that physical activity levels between boys and girls is quite similar. And then things happen, like, you know, girls hit puberty and then the menstrual cycle starts happening. There's a lot of hormonal change. And there's also that academic pressure. So a lot of girls choose to focus on academia. comparative to boys, but we actually see that girls who decide to stay involved in sport have better academic outcomes. So it's kind of like a catch-22, but it's that thing, it's kind of subconscious things that are floating around that women do pick up on, and they kind of can carry that with them, and they feel like maybe they're not as valuable to their team or to their club, or that, you know, they don't get as much rewards socially, and that does have an influence as well. And I do think by ignoring the differences between men and women, we're kind of leaving a big gap of information and of research that's unturned. And it's not to say that one is better than the other, it's just that they're different. And we see that at the elite end, we are losing female athletes to preventable injuries. And then at the participation end, we're losing countless female athletes who never really get the chance to give it a go. You know, they can't stand up to social pressures, and they don't really know how to get involved, and they feel like they're not catered for or not supported, and they never really get the chance to start. So this gap really needs to be bridged, and it is being bridged, which is brilliant. We see so many fantastic initiatives starting up, but it's just to be aware that there are differences, and we're going to talk through a little bit of those today. I would also like to acknowledge that if anyone has tried to, you know, have these conversations and, you know, see what you can do with your female athletes as you're supporting your female athletes, and particularly for coaches, I know that there is fantastic work being done there, but often the research is still in papers. It's, you know, sometimes you have to pay for them to get them. It's not very accessible to understand all this information, and how does it actually apply to you as a coach, and how are you going to get the best out of your female athletes? And these are some of the hurdles that we all face. So whether or not you're a female athlete or a coach or a parent, these are some of the hurdles that we face that are really invisible. And actually, these are the ones that stop most of the progress happening. The first one is lack of awareness. Like, you know, and I would say myself, even as a female athlete and having had a period for years, I just never really was that aware that it was important. I never really gave it much thought. It never really came up into my sphere of learning, personally or academically. And so that is one of the biggest things that really stops us from kind of embracing this information, is that we just don't really know it's there, or it's not really talked about, or we don't really know it's important. The second thing is that there's not much support for having this conversation. So even if you are ready and you are willing to have it, and that kind of ties into the social awkwardness, like you can't have, like, just if you have this information and you want to, you know, share it with parents, or if you're an athlete and you're like, oh, I think this is really important, but your coach maybe hasn't really come across it before, you don't really get much positive feedback. So you don't really continue having the conversation. And then that kind of leads into our third thing, which is social awkwardness, which everyone has a little bit of. And I really admire the young athletes who are going to stick with me here today, because a lot of female athletes just feel like periods are a little bit gross, and they just don't really want to think about it or talk about it, and they would prefer if they didn't have them, and it's seem really annoying, and they don't want to talk about it, and they're kind of mortified. So I also really acknowledge that, and I see that, and I want to know that I hear and I understand, and I hopefully will be able to kind of shelve a little bit of that feeling, so you can really get the best care and the best support that you really deserve as a young athlete. Moving on to, so questions to ask yourself. So again, these can be some things that you can jot down if you find it useful or beneficial. So questions to ask yourself. These are based on being an athlete, but if you're a coach, you'll just kind of flip them. So have you ever talked to your coach about your periods? Have you ever felt off and not known why? And do you know how your body changes? So vice versa, if you're a coach, have you ever talked to your athletes about getting periods? Have you ever felt like they've not been really training to where they should be or could be, and not really understood why, because their training has been very consistent? And do you know how the female body changes throughout the menstrual cycle? So just ponder those questions for a second, think about them, think about how they relate to you and your situation. So yeah, this is one of the this is a study they carried out in Ireland and England last year with women who were physically active. So not just specifically athletes, but women who were, let's say, training consistently, maybe 5 times a week. So 90% of them said that their menstrual cycle affected their training in some way. So that is quite a large number of women. 82% said of exercising women said they had never received any education on their menstrual cycle and how that was affected or how it affects exercise. And the really sad thing is less than 1 in 5 had ever discussed anything with their coach. So we can see there's a big discrepancy here. So we have the experience up here, but we have the conversation levels down here. And there's just seems to be just no communication between the two. And that is perfectly fine. That's normal. That's the way that it has been for years. And again, like this stuff, like you hearing this and understanding this, this is really shows that you're ahead of the curve, you know, because it's not happening. You know, we are getting behind the women in sports movement, but again, this conversation of how important your menstrual cycle is and how your body changes, it's just not trickling through because of those hidden hurdles, because people feel it's a bit awkward or they don't really sure, or there's no one to really talk about it with. So, you know, that you're in the majority if you find these statistics a little bit shocking, and if you're like, oh, I haven't really done much about it. I mean, nobody really has up to date. And that's what we're trying to change here. But we see that all these statistics show that there is just no space for this conversation, that it's not happening. And that really we're kind of missing a trick in the book. I mean, people are talking about like the 1%, you know, improvements every day. I mean, this is a big factor that's affecting 50% of the population, you know, like women having menstrual cycles. So, you know, if you're looking for the 1%, fine, but really let's make sure we have all the basics covered, and understanding the menstrual cycle is really a basic, even though it hasn't been in that conversation yet. Oh yeah, this is Dr. Stacy Sims, who is a fantastic researcher and female athlete herself in New Zealand. She used to be an Ironman or Ironwoman. And she used to be really frustrated because basically she was performing like at the elite of the elite level, and she would find that at different times of the cycle her body would just be changing, and she wouldn't understand why. Like if she was going out for a 3 or 4 hour cycle, some days, even though she'd be well rested, well, you know, she'd be, you know, have eaten properly and eaten well and would be relaxed, she would find that her performances was just fluctuating. And back when she was she was competing, there was no research for her, so she kind of made it her life mission to research this, and she coined this very famous term that female athletes are not little men. And again, she is one of the leading thinkers, I suppose, in female physiology. She has an excellent book called Roar, for anyone kind of interested in reading up a little bit more about this. And I'm actually going to make some show notes, so I will pop a lot of resources. If I mention any resources, I'm going to pop those down underneath, so anyone who this resonates with can kind of go have a look and see, kind of find out more for themselves, because like I said, this is only a conversation starter. But I think this is really important, and this kind of is true of a lot of women's experience in sport, is there's been no consideration for the fact that they are a woman, and it just sums it up quite nicely. And the differences that she is talking about, like, you know, everyone has 2 arms and 2 legs, so I'm not saying that, but women's bodies are anatomically different physiologically and hormonally. So when I talk about like the anatomy, I'm talking about things like, okay, so men would have, let's say, wider shoulders and narrower hips, and women would have wider hips in proportion to their shoulders. And you might be like, why is that important? But it's basically the hip to knee ratio in women is slightly larger, and that can leave them more prone to things like ACL injuries. That is just one of the key things that I suppose has never been addressed in sport, that just because physiologically women have a different shape, that their body just moves a little bit differently. Other things, and this is something really practical, but women have breasts. And you know, if you think as runners of how much money we all spend, and I spend a hell of a lot of money on runners. So, you know, we have our track shoes, or racers, spikes, cross-country spikes, like I have it all. And, you know, we spend a lot of money on it, but really, I never give any time and attention to getting a good sports bra until much later on in life. So again, you know, we know that young girls, especially when they're coming through puberty, like that is one of the greatest sources of anxiety, is developing breasts. Especially if, you know, girls are maybe developing before their peers, or if they have particularly large breasts. And something like a really well-fitted, good sports bra can just remove all that anxiety. So it also reduces 90% of breast pain when exercising, and it also reduces back pain. And again, this is just a conversation that should be had, let's say, between, maybe an older female athlete and a younger female athlete, or a mom and a daughter, or, but again, we're sometimes just not aware that it's really important. And I would really recommend, on a practical level, stay away from like the fashion brands if you can, and get more into like the sports brands, because they're the ones that have research and development teams in place. So I will actually again attach a video as to how one should go about buying a proper fitted sports bra. And like, I would really recommend trying loads on, maybe trying 3 or 4 different ones on, seeing what fits, and actually like jogging on the spot in the changing room. Because, a lot of athletes get gait analysis and make sure their runners are on point. But this, again, is something that's so important and can have just so many benefits. Again, I know that sports bras are really expensive, especially, the really good ones, like they are bloody expensive. But that, again, it is investing, and you'll have it for, for a few years. And also something to think about is that breasts do change in size. So before, at certain times of the month, you might feel like they're a little bit bigger. So again, play around. You can have like a bigger one on some days, or a smaller one, and just making sure that you feel comfortable. And that's the biggest thing to go by. As long as you feel comfortable, you're doing it right. And the other difference, I suppose, is the menstrual cycle. So women are cyclical, where, basically meaning that, they're changing in a circular, or not a circular, but, over a monthly cycle. Whereas men don't really have that. And that is one of the biggest differences that hasn't really been addressed. So we're going to be talking about that over the course of the conversation. But yeah, if you've never considered any of these things, almost great, because there's so much that you can learn, and there's so many, I suppose, easy techniques that you can adopt, and that hopefully you'll be able, if you're a coach, to support younger female athletes and older female athletes. And if you're a female athlete yourself, I mean, this is one of the biggest unturned stones of the sports world, and that there's a lot of hidden advantage there. That if you're aware of how your body is changing, you'll be able to get more out of yourself and out of your performances, if that's what you're looking for. And again, I would say we don't know everything about the menstrual cycle, but that doesn't mean we don't have the conversations. So, you'll listen to this webinar, and then you go off and you'll be like, oh, what did she say about this again? Or, what was she saying about that? It doesn't really matter what I said. You know it's important, and now you're starting to break down some of those barriers, and you're aware of them, and knowing that there are things there helps you overcome them. Kind of helps you giggle through those awkward moments, and that's great. At least you're still having those conversations. So we're going to be breaking down the menstrual cycle. So hang on there 2 seconds. Staying hydrated, key. Okay, so the menstrual cycle made easy. And this is very much an overview and just a starting point. So we won't get into it too much. We won't get too heavy with it. So the 28-day average cycle is a myth. So many women don't have a 28-day cycle. I like to call it like a unicorn cycle. It's kind of mythical and stuff. A lot of women will have a cycle that lasts anywhere between like 21 days and 45 days. But for the ease of kind of explaining it, that's why they use a 28-day cycle, because that's the median average day. But it doesn't mean that that's the normal, or that's the, what you should be aiming for. Every body is different. Therefore, I'm going to be breaking it down into 4 phases of your menstrual cycle, and I'm going to be talking about 2 main hormones. Now, there are a lot more things going on, to be honest, but this is, I think, all you need. And just on that note, I would like to say that if you are a female athlete, like, you are amazing, regardless of where you are in your menstrual cycle. So your aerobic ability, your lactic, your power, your cognitive abilities are always there. So they never change. They don't go away no matter where you are in your menstrual cycle. So I would just like to acknowledge that, because, I think there's a lot of negative connotations about the menstrual cycle, and that's really not something that I have found to be true. I find that that's a kind of message that's portrayed in social media, but actually behind it all, like, female athletes know themselves. And I suppose it's just good to to acknowledge the fact that, you know, you are always a great athlete. But what this will help you do is be aware of how your body can be responding to different stimulus. Okay, so we have a very, very busy chart here. So nobody panic. I will talk you through it nice and simply. But these are the 4 phases of the menstrual cycle. So commonly in research, this is how they break it down. Sometimes people use 3, or sometimes people use like 6, whatever you want to do yourself. But I think this is for the sake of who we're talking to, so coaches and maybe younger female athletes and older female athletes. I think this is enough to be going on with. So at the bottom of the screen, you see, here we go. Oh yeah, at the bottom of the screen, you see there is day 0 and day 28. If your cycle is longer, you know, this can go up to day 45, and you will see that these lines, these are your hormones changing, that they will just be a little bit more spread out, and you see here up the side are your hormonal levels. So what does all this mean? So it kind of means that here is day 0/day 1, and this is when you're on your period, so the first day of full bleeding. So again, this is something that women would be so aware of, like, because a lot of women might be like spotting for a day or two, and spotting is basically just where it's not a full period, but it's kind of like maybe a little bit of blood, or you know, it's just a little bit of discharge. And again, actually, this is something that might be really useful. For a lot of men, they've no idea how much blood a woman actually loses throughout her menstrual cycle, and it's maybe around a teaspoon. So not actually that much at all. And I think, again, like, this is good to have these conversations, because there's a lot of myths and misconceptions out there. So again, if you have any questions, like, do feel free to ask, because I feel like, you know, a lot of male coaches do feel like this is a conversation that's very awkward, or, you know, they don't feel like supported in this way. So again, like, I'm so comfortable to talk to you about any questions you might have, or any issues that, you know, you might be concerned with, or, you know, we'll get to those anyway in a minute. Okay, so day 0 to day 5 is when you're on your period, so that's when you're bleeding. And this is funny, because this is the time you're actually most hormonally like a man, because you see here all hormones are pretty low, and that's what men are kind of like, you know, most of the time. But it's just funny, it's an interesting talk to have. And then we see generally after about 5 days that we see estrogen here. So it's estrogen and progesterone are the 2 major hormones that kind of cause the menstrual cycle. We see estrogen rising here. And estrogen rising is just, I mean, it's funny when people say that thing, oh, she's being so hormonal. I mean, I just don't get it, because women are hormonal all of the time. Every human being is hormonal all of the time. And hormones cause so many brilliant experiences, good moods, good energies. And it's funny that they've just been, you know, associated with something negative. And it's funny, because hormones are the things that kind of get you up in the morning. They're the thing that make you excited and joyful and enjoying life. So I just don't really get when people say you're hormonal. If someone says you're being hormonal, tell them that they are also hormonal. Okay, so we see that estrogen is rising, and estrogen rises in order to cause ovulation. So ovulation happens, okay, around day 14. Now, again, we'll forget about dates here, but basically from after you're bleeding to ovulation, and you can tell over time if you're kind of in tune with what's happening in your body, whether or not you're ovulating. So your baseline temperature rises anywhere between 0.5 degrees and 1.5, and you'll notice like a slippery discharge. So that's how you know that you're ovulating, and that's the kind of window of fertility, let's say. Now, again, this isn't a science class, but it's good to have an awareness of actually what's going on in your body. In phase 2, I would like to point out that women are feeling very robust, your immune system is boosted, you recover quicker, muscle is built a lot quicker. You're really, it's a great time for constructive open feedback. So women are very emotionally resilient. And it's really something that I don't think enough of us are aware of or kind of give enough credit to. So this is kind of like the great part of the menstrual cycle. And then we see after ovulation, we move into phase 3, which is luteal phase. And this is where progesterone kind of comes into play, which is this yellow hormone here. And progesterone is amazing. It's very, it's kind of a calming hormone. So things like better sleep, reduced anxiety, a more sense of calm. It's a great time, interestingly, to do kind of more endurance exercise. But again, like they have done a lot of studies on, you know, when's the best time to train and this, that, and the other. But again, it's so personal. So these studies, again, there's not very many of them out there. And I would, again, just rely on your own experience. So, you know, this is all what the science is telling us, but how do you feel in your body? You know, and just to kind of be aware of that. We then drop down into, oh, sorry, now we'll go back. We'll then drop down into phase 4, so late luteal. And this is often the bit that people say, oh, you're being hormonal, or this is kind of often the crap bit, to be honest. And what's happening here is all the hormones are dropping, and that drop in hormones, what they think is that's what causes inflammation in the body. So that can lead to different kinds of symptoms, things like back pain, a little bit of breast pain, maybe some moodiness, low motivation, low energy. Again, we see from the first stat that I showed you that 90% of athletes said that their menstrual cycle had an effect on their training, and I would suspect that a lot of that is in this phase. But then again, there is also that 10% who don't really have any physiological changes. And I think that's really important to acknowledge as well. Because if you're a woman or a female athlete and, you know, you're listening to this and you're like, well, that doesn't really apply to me, that's okay. And I think it's good to understand that, you know, you don't really experience those symptoms, and that doesn't mean that other women don't, if you kind of get what I mean. And everyone experiences this differently. Everyone's body has their own hormonal fluctuations. And I think the most empowering thing is to be aware of that. So we will move on to the hidden advantages of the menstrual cycle. And I love this because I just don't think it's talked about enough. So even if this is all a bit too much for you, and to be honest, it can be a lot, and particularly for a younger athlete. So I am very, you know, grateful that you're here today listening. Your body is amazing. And the fact that you're having a menstrual cycle is really, really amazing and something to be celebrated. It is like getting a big tick at the, like, a monthly report card, because when you get your menstrual cycle, it tells us a lot about what's going on in your body. It tells us that you're not that, you know, even if you feel stressed, that you're coping very well with training load, you're coping very well with psychological stress, you're coping very well with, let's say, you're getting your energy balance right, and that your training is all very balanced. So we also know that, like, having a menstrual cycle is really good for your bone health, for your immune system, for loads of different other systems that are going on in your body. So even though the experience itself, again, as a young athlete, it can be really challenging at the start, like your first few periods are quite a big deal. You know, I don't think we really talk about that, but they are quite a big deal. But, you know, you will learn to kind of manage it and, like, learn about your own body over time. But just know that having a menstrual cycle is a really positive thing, especially as an athlete. And I would say that, you know, a lot of women might not be, let's say, on a normal or a natural cycle. They might be on the contraceptive pill. I have a slide about that. No, I didn't include it. Okay, so I just want to have a little wee conversation about the contraceptive pill. And bearing in mind that I'm not a GP, I'm not a sports physiologist or anything, but I am someone who has had a lot of experiences with doctors, with my own, you know, experiences, and I've been to a lot of endocrinologists. So just as a personal bit of background detail, I didn't have a period for 4 years, and I never thought it was important to mention to my doctor or to my coach, just purely through lack of awareness. And I think there's a little bit of information can be really beneficial. So that's the only reason I share these things, is in case you're a young athlete and, you know, you do have a problem, right? There is something, like, I would encourage you to speak out. And for those who are on the contraceptive pill, these are some things that I would consider, or wish I had considered, let's say, when I was thinking about whether or not I'm using contraception or hormonal contraception in particular. So if you are on the pill, you don't have the same hormonal fluctuations as if your body wasn't on the pill. So when we go back, so if you see here all these different lines that are happening throughout the month, you don't, your body isn't really working like that. So yours might be a little bit more stagnant. And that's okay, you know, that's just what the pill does to our bodies. And if you are on the pill, your withdrawal bleed, so when maybe you take a break, so a lot of pills are 3 weeks on, 1 week off. When you're on that withdrawal week, that actually isn't a period. So it's not your body. We basically don't know whether or not your body would be producing a natural period otherwise. So again, like the pill isn't a good or a bad thing. And again, it's very personal, especially if you're using it for contraceptive reasons. I mean, you know, you have to use what you have. And it's just to be aware that if your doctor, if you're experiencing, let's say, menstrual cycle problems or issues or dysfunctions, or you don't have a period, and the first line that you hear is, oh, we'll just put you on the pill to get a period, that's not actually getting a full period. It's a withdrawal bleed. But if you choose to be on the pill, there is still loads of ways that you can learn about your body, and I will be talking about those again coming up. But it's just something to be aware of. And when you are going to a GP, and this is probably one of the best pieces of advice I can give you, is to put in a little like side note. So if you're ringing up your GP, and let's say if you have a male GP, or if you have a GP and they haven't really had this conversation with you, I would ring up and ask if there was anyone in the practice that had a specific area of interest in women's health, or had a specific area of interest in sports medicine, because you really need someone who's going to talk to you through these different options. And I would be a big believer in lifestyle first. So, you know, and we're going to be talking about different lifestyle things that we can address, and how they might help. And, you know, if you try those and you still feel like this is the best option, you know, like, please, everyone feel ownership over what your choices are, but make sure that they're informed, and make sure that you get to have these conversations with a GP who knows what they're talking about. And also, again, with older athletes. So older female athletes will have had a wealth of experience of using different pills, and what worked, what didn't work, and what worked in their body. So again, drawing on that experience that's probably in your own club is a great way to start. And if you're a coach, and then chat to other coaches about what they've done, how they've recommended. So it can be not a funny situation, but it's very personal. And again, there is no right and wrong, but it's just to kind of acknowledge it, because I think it's something that goes unacknowledged in a lot of sports science and a lot of, let's say, women in sports conversations. But on that thread, if you're not getting a period and you're not on the pill or anything, I would speak up, because, you know, it's okay to miss a period here and there. You know, our bodies are crazy things, and things like, you know, traveling, exam stress, transition, like, they can all affect the menstrual cycle. But if it goes on for a period of time and you're not getting your periods, like, I would really get support with that, and someone who will work with you. And it takes time. This is a conversation that will last you a lifetime, I would say, because, you know, nothing happens overnight, and it takes time to kind of understand your body, and for your body to respond to, let's say, lifestyle changes. But I, you know, do like value what your body is going through and experiencing, and make sure you just have the space to have that conversation. So if this gives you anything, I hope it maybe gives you a little bit of confidence to kind of have this conversation. Again, I'm going to stick up a resource here. So this girl called Lara Briden, she has a book called The Period Repair Manual. So I suppose this book would be specifically for maybe older female athletes, not older, but someone who's had a cycle for a while and kind of is interested in learning more about their cycle. It is a fantastic book, and it's a little bit sciencey, but a great resource. So again, I'll pop that down in the show notes. Okay, getting to the really good stuff. What can athletes do? And I suppose as coaches, what can you encourage your athletes to do? So the first and most important thing I would say is to track your cycle. So this is something that was very new to me, not even that long ago. Maybe it was only about maybe 4 years ago, I started tracking my own menstrual cycle. And at the start, I was like, I don't really see the point. But then very quickly, after maybe about 2 or 3 months, I was like the biggest advocate of menstrual cycle tracking. So there's so many different ways you can do this, but the whole idea is that you begin to understand your own body. So it doesn't matter if you have a 21-day cycle or a 45-day cycle, you will know what's going on in your body. And I would really recommend that you record the good things as well as some of the kind of not more negative things, but, you know, those things like maybe low mood and low energy. Record both of them so that you know exactly where you're at. And like things like high motivation, you know, feeling very confident, feeling very sociable, or something like, you know, was feeling very in tune with what I want, or, you know, all these different things, they're all really valuable bits of information. So definitely pop them in. And again, there's loads of different ways that you can track your menstrual cycle. You can use a calendar and just like mark off the days. What are great are menstrual cycle tracking apps, if you're used or if you like apps. So there's an Irish one called Fitter Woman, that kind of gives you breakdowns of specific things you can focus on in different phases of your menstrual cycle. There's ones called Clue, Flow, P Tracker is another one. So again, like maybe download like 3 or 4 of them and see which one you like, see the layout and the design. But I would encourage you to input how you're feeling and stuff. And what you do, you start first day of your period, you input that into the app, and then you'll start to see over time the pattern emerging. I will say that if you're a younger athlete and you've only maybe had 1 or 2 periods, that, you know, it does take time. It can take anything from like a year to like 3 or 4 for your cycles to start getting a bit more regular. And that's very normal and very common. Yeah, it's just the body works in crazy ways. So, you know, a lot is normal and common. It just can be different maybe to your friend's experience of it. Lifestyle. So this is a big thing that I'm going to talk a lot about as well in the next slide. But things like stress management, relaxation, balance. So all those things, nutrition, I'm going to come back to those in a minute, but those are a big key part of, I suppose, getting a hold on what's going on in your body and what we can do to kind of make sure you have the best experience possible. And then training and resting. So this is a really interesting one. I feel like a lot of athletes, all athletes, male and female, do this thing where we train really hard, but then we don't really value recovery as much. And it's funny, it should be a 50-50 split, because if you're training really hard and you don't get the proper recovery, you don't get the same benefit from your training. And this is something now I didn't realize till very late in life. So, you know, if this is new to you, that's okay. You know, like I will say that we are all probably, you know, we can all probably put our hands up and say that we've cut a recovery short, or we haven't taken enough rest. Or a thing that I do is on my rest day, I end up cleaning the house, you know, going for a big walk, doing the shopping, you know, just doing loads of stuff. And I'm knackered. Yes, I haven't trained, but I'm still exhausted. So, you know, really getting that balance of training and resting. And why that's particularly important for female athletes is that overtraining can be something that can actually stop your periods from happening. That's kind of a bit mad, and it's just something to be aware of, I suppose, especially as coaches, you know, to make sure that your athletes are taking the recovery days that you're setting. So even if they're telling you, you know, ask them what they got up to, because if you're out and about and you're going to hike on your resting day, it's not really a rest. And also what actually on lifestyle, what I think a lot about what's actually really valuable is having fun. So having balance and having fun with your friends, and I would really encourage that, because it really helps your body deal with any stress that's going on. Like having a good laugh is so valuable, and having balance in your life. I mean, as athletes, I think, you know, often balance is the first thing to go. We're busy, we're working, or we're studying, and we're training, and we're getting our nutrition right, and we're going to bed early, and this, that, and the other. But it's to make space every so often for just, you know, chilling out, going to the beach, going to the cinema, having a lazy day. Like those things are really, really good for your body. And the only reason I'm saying this is because, again, I say a lot of these things, but I think it's also true of a lot of athletes, even of myself. Sometimes I don't really relax enough. So again, you know, you're not alone here if these are things that you might be doing too much of. This is something really interesting. So periods and performance, and this is particularly for maybe actually all women, but especially girls. If you've never had a period on your race day before, this is really, really important. And I just want to say that I have PB'd loads on my period. So I've raced on my period, I've trained on my period. You know, it hasn't really made a difference. And that's something that I think a lot of young girls are really unsure about, and something that can cause quite a bit of anxiety is, oh my God, I'm on my period. Do people know? am I going to be able to perform to my best? And I would say, again, it goes back to what I was saying. So you always have that same ability. You are always your athlete. It doesn't matter where you are in your menstrual cycle. You still have that training bank of all that great training that you've been doing. And these are some strategies to tick off to make sure that you can get the very best out of yourself, no matter where you are in your cycle. So just so you know that I'm not making this up, I was at a workshop with Dr. Emma Ross, she just resigned, I think, but the head of UK sports, and she was in charge of the female athletes. And we used to work with female athletes, and on day one she used to ask them, do you think you can win an Olympic gold medal on your period, or 2 or 3 days before your period, when you're in that inflammation stage 4? And loads of them said no. They're like, no, can't do that. And it was funny because, we prepare everything down to the minute detail of what you're going to have for breakfast, but sometimes we forget that you could have your period that day. And she used to work with them on different strategies to ensure that every single athlete, by the end of their time there, said that they felt like they could do the best, or they could PB any day of their menstrual cycle. So again, that obviously takes a lot of work and a lot of commitment, but it is something to be aware of, that that's the standard that you can get to. And these are some of the main things that they work on in the elite setup. So we can start with diet and nutrition. I know there's been some brilliant webinars that Athletics Ireland have put out by Evan and Katie, and they're just excellent in terms of their approach to food, fueling properly, fueling correctly. And again, I'm not a nutritionist, but I do know that there's some things that you can do that will really help your experience of the menstrual cycle. And a lot of that is basically, in the most simplest of language, eating unprocessed whole foods. So lots of veg, lots of greens. Also for young athletes, having a really good breakfast is so key. Like, something that's going to keep you going for the morning, especially the day of the race. And keep it simple. I'm not talking anything crazy. I'm talking like porridge or banana and toast, or, yogurt and granola, and to try it out beforehand and just be comfortable with what you're eating the day of a race. And particularly as well then after the race. I think we always forget about after the race. So if you're on your period, or you're coming up to your period, you have your good breakfast, you have your race. A lot of women, or a lot of athletes in general actually, forget about their post-race nutrition. And really, when you're in that phase, getting food within the first 30 minutes after the performance or after your race is so important, or even after a hard training session. When I say performance here, it might just be your Saturday morning session. Getting food here is so important, because it can really help your body start recovering for the next week, because you don't want to train or perform really hard and then lose a week of training because you're tired and exhausted. So again, it's actually the pre and post nutrition is really, really important. What else do I have down? Oh yeah, making sure that you're just kind of getting enough, so you're not under fueling. And I know that the guys definitely, so if you are interested in those nutritional aspects, because the guys have covered them in such detail, I won't go into too much there. Exercise. So again, this kind of sounds counterintuitive, but again, coming up to, let's say, a performance or a race, and if you are on your period, your energy levels might be a little bit lower. And I suppose the thing is to balance that out. Maybe, if you normally do, I don't know, I'll give my own personal example. So if I race on a Saturday, I might do a little light session on a Tuesday or Wednesday, and then do some easy running. I might actually just scale back that easy running. So if I would normally do like 5 or 6 miles, I might just do 3 or 4, depending on where my body is, because my body is already under a little bit, it's doing quite a lot anyway. So again, it's just to have that balance. And let's say, again, it's post. So let's say, I run really hard on a Saturday morning as a distance runner. We do our long runs on a Sunday. But if I've really gone to the well and dug deep in that session, my body really mightn't be ready to train again or to do that long run on a Sunday. So like, again, here you've loads of options. So you can push that later on in the day. I can maybe skip it, put in my recovery day there, change it to Monday. And this is things that I have been doing, and I do talk to my coach about it a bit. But again, that's come from years of experience of maybe slightly doing too much around a performance and my period. Whereas like, if you weren't on your period, you might be able to run your race on Saturday and you might feel grand the next day, and you might be able to do, a little shakeout jog. So again, it's really personal. But again, it's just to be aware that your body is working a little bit harder let's say at certain times in the month, and to really create those good strategies. Sleep then, and again, so like something crazy, I was looking up the stats on this, and again, they change all the time, but like anywhere between like 50 and 80% of teens are not getting enough sleep. And we know that lack of sleep is one of, like, it can worsen any PMS. So PMS is those things that I was talking about, those symptoms that you get before your period. So yeah, like even making sure that you get that 8 hour plus of sleep, and I'm talking 8 hours plus, like 6 or 7. And even like, again, if you do have trouble sleeping, that's fine. Making sure that you get that rest at least, so that you're relaxing and winding down. And, there's loads of things that you can do around your sleep hygiene. So that's things like really and truly not having your phone in your bedroom. And, people be like, oh, it's my alarm. Buy an alarm clock. Don't need your phone in your bedroom. It's maybe even like put your phone away. I have a phone alarm that I have on in the evening time, and around 9 or half 9 it goes off, and then I try and turn my phone off because I don't need to be engaging with it. I don't need to be scrolling on Instagram. I don't need to be checking my emails. I don't need to be doing that. I put it away, and then when it comes to bedtime, it's a lot easier for me to fall asleep. So those are some little things that you can do that kind of just be mindful of getting, and that like if you are getting plenty of sleep, it really is, it puts your body in a great position to be able to drop into that motivation. Because we can see, and again, going back again just for 2 seconds to reiterate, this phase 2 here, motivation will be really high, and you can really drop into that space of just knowing that you're going to have a good session, of feeling good, of feeling energetic. And a lot of what I'm talking about is what's happening here in your own personal phase 4. So we're taking off different things that we can do, but like interesting things like getting up maybe a little bit earlier before the race or before your training session, and putting on some music that you enjoy doing, kind of doing an extra long warm-up, so that like there's things that you can do that if your motivation is low, if your energy is low, that you can get to your full potential, but it's what can you do in between to really allow you to get there, so that when you come to the start line that you're like, yeah, I'm ready to go, I'm ready for this. So things that I do is like I roll out, I'm listening to some really nice music, I'm kind of getting myself gently pumped and hyped, and then in the car on the way to training I might turn on some Avicii, so I'm ready to go. So those little things, just to be aware of them. And that's what we're really talking about, is like, how can we make sure that, or if you have race day, exactly the same thing, and you're coming up to your period and you wake up and you're like, oh God, I don't know how I feel. Absolutely no problem. You have your strategies. You're like, okay, well, I'm going to have my breakfast, and then I'm going to go for a little walk or a little shakeout, or I'm going to listen to that playlist that I love listening to, like something as simple as 10 really good feel good songs that put you in good form. Like, that's as simple as it is. Most people have Spotify now. Make a playlist. You can call it your period playlist if you want. You don't have to, but I have one. Okay. And then stress management. So this is a really fun one. I should have called it having the crack. So again, things like just having a laugh are so important, and I think we don't really value them as much, because it can seem kind of like, that you're not being as dedicated to your running, or but really having a laugh and sharing your experience is really powerful. So I do feel like there is a growing community of women in Ireland, particularly in athletics, who are really supporting each other. There's the Irish Wolf Pack, and there's a great group in Galway, another great group in Cork. I mean, they're all over the place, and they really support each other, and that is a form of stress management. So creating that team environment, that team energy, is just so good for all athletes, and also for coaches, because then that your athletes are kind of supporting each other. You can focus a little bit more on coaching, right? And that the older ones are kind of taking care of the younger ones, or someone coming up to exam time, that your teammates are going to take care of you, and that is a really important form of stress management. Even though I hate to call it stress management, again, I'll change it to having the crack. And again, just some practicals that for coaches are really good to hear. Maybe for older female athletes, this is something that mightn't really apply to you. But again, it's really for young athletes. And again, just passing this information on. If you think there's someone, or if you have a daughter or a niece or a cousin or someone that you feel like could use this information, absolutely have this conversation with them. And they can awkward laugh and giggle through the whole way. I don't care. But you're having the conversation, and you're showing them that there's space for them to express how they're feeling and how their bodies are changing, because my God, it is a lot of change for a child to go through. And we really want to keep them in sport. We really want to keep them involved, and this is something that stops a lot of girls getting involved. So again, things like period products, it's a minefield. Like, think back to when you were younger. You don't really know what's going on, and like there's weird ads on TV, and there's no real information. So it's having that conversation. So again, if you're a male coach, this might be a time that you might get a female coach or a parent to step in if you're not comfortable having this conversation. And if the athlete is under 18, which they probably will be, it probably would be more appropriate to make sure their parent is involved or is having this conversation with them. It's not on you to tell them this, I suppose. But things like, do you prefer pads, tampons, or menstrual cups? So most athletes start with pads, but again, if you're swimming, that's not really an option. So, tampons are the most commonly used thing. I will say that with tampons, they're really difficult to use at the start. Like, they're really hard to figure out. And a lot of women actually don't insert them properly, so they can be kind of sore and uncomfortable. And if it's sore and uncomfortable, it's not correctly fitted. So there's a good marker if you're using tampons. And what I would recommend is checking out a YouTube video of how to do it. So from the comfort of your own home, you don't need to ask anyone. If you're really embarrassed, just check it out. Make sure that you feel comfortable and practice with them. So that if race day comes up and you want to use a tampon, that you can use it properly, and that you're going to be comfortable. And then kind of being aware of how long they kind of last for. So I remember having no idea how long a tampon would last for. And like a really easy way to come around that is changing just before, or maybe half an hour before your race, changing and doing your little bit of a warm up, or maybe an hour beforehand, that it's comfortable, and that they recommend you change your tampon anywhere between 4 and 8 hours depending on flow. And again, like how heavy or light your flow is will vary, but again, over time, and when you're tracking, you'll actually become aware of what's going on. And then little things like disposal of tampons and pads. So there's this little company called Fab Little Bag, and they're just these little discreet little they're just little cardboardy, plasticky things that you can put any products in case there are no closed bins. So if you're a mom or you're a parent, get some of those if there's no closed bins in your club or on race day, because I know cross country, cross country is hilarious. Like, there's barely even bathrooms. And if you have a period and if you're young, that is really a source of anxiety. And if you're, I suppose most fathers have no education about menstrual cycle, and there's a lot of dads who are bringing a lot of their daughters to these events, and it's something to just be aware of and be conscious of, because it can just cause, the athlete is there to perform, and it's causing her a little bit of anxiety. So again, those are something to be conscious of. Spare change of shorts, great idea. And if you're nervous about having this chat, get someone, talk to someone who you're comfortable with, who you kind of like, who you feel like you'll be able to have a bit of a laugh with. So an older athlete or a mom, or again, someone's sister, or whoever it is that you feel a connection with. Talk to them about it, because you don't need to make yourself miserable having these conversations. They're not meant to be terrible, they're there for you to have. So yeah, moving on to, we're getting there, guys. Am I running over time? No, I'm talking away, they're mad, but I'll just fly through the last few things. So these are some of the opportunities and the challenges. It does take time. This does not happen overnight. And again, this is a conversation that we're having. We're not changing the way female athletes are in Ireland, but it is a bit of awareness. And, there is a lot of historical stuff going on, and structures are in place. But I do think that being aware of these things, it's great, and it's a great place to start at, but don't be worried if it doesn't happen overnight, is the main thing. People are unique, and every woman will have a different menstrual cycle. I've already kind of covered that. Like, just because Mary has a 45-day cycle and you have a 22-day cycle, that's no problem. Own that. And again, I know as a coach that can be really difficult. I'm not saying like you ever need to change how you're coaching, but it's just to have an awareness that someone might need a little bit more support at different times, and that that the door is open for them to have that conversation with you. It's very much a two-way thing, not a linear progress. It's definitely not. Nothing in life is. Absolutely nothing in life. Like some cycles, you have great cycle, and you're like, I don't have any problems. Get away from me, Órna. I don't care. And then sometimes you might really feel a little bit down, or a little bit worried, or this, that, and the other. That's really normal, really natural. And again, it just takes time, and keep tracking, keep coming back to those 4 points. You know, your diet, are you getting your energy in balance, sleeping, and stress management. You know, like you can tick a lot of things off with those. And if not, you know, check it out with a GP. And oh yeah, my last one. See, this is why the challenges and opportunities. It can feel uncomfortable, but I guarantee you, once you start women off having this conversation, once you give girls that support, there's no stopping them. You know, it's not anything that carries any shame, because everyone has it. Like, all women have a menstrual cycle of some sort, you know, or maybe, you know, maybe they don't, but all women do have hormonal changes. So it's really so normal, and it can feel like a challenge, but it's actually an opportunity, because once it's open, you know, there is, you know, you just carry on with your life, and it's great. And then you're taking advantage of a big thing that's happening in all women's lives. Brilliant. We're actually, I'm talking through it nicely. So I did put out the question, if anyone did have any questions that they want to have covered in this webinar, that I would happily answer them. So the first one is, what can I do as a coach? So, you know, you have this information now, you've had this conversation started, and where do I go now? The first thing I would say is, ask your athletes if the menstrual cycle is something that they are open to talking about. Just ask them. They're humans, they don't know. And if they say no, that is okay. You know, just like, you know, it can be hard and it can be a lot. So if let's say you're a coach and you've had, you know, you're aware of this, maybe send this video on to them, and they might be able to benefit, and then they might be able to have that conversation with you. If they're not at that phase yet, no problem. Maybe communicating, and this is one of the biggest things, communicating with your older athletes, asking them and allowing the younger athletes to listen in on those conversations. It kind of lets them know how the conversation goes. It shows them that it's really normal, and their questions actually might be answered by just listening to you guys. So again, that's what it comes back to. It does take time. So, you know, not to be discouraged by that. Yeah, practical level, have periods or have pads and tampons in all first aid boxes in case someone gets their period unexpected. I mean, it has happened to everybody. And I think it's just really reassuring to know that there's always products there. And you know what, if you're uncomfortable, again, get a parent or ask someone to buy those things and pop them in the first aid box. You won't regret it. It's great. It's practical. I think all first aid boxes should have them. And if you can, just ensure that bathrooms have a closed lid. Again, for younger athletes, it's just a relief. And even as a female, like as a senior athlete, like, it's great just to know that you'll be able to change before a race or a session with no problems or no difficulties. And then the other question that was sent in, and again, I will open this form up for more questions afterwards, is I had an email in from an athlete, and it was a very brave email. And she was just kind of talking about how she didn't have her periods, and then that she had a low body weight, and that she kind of maybe ran the enjoyment out of running. So this is something that actually a lot of women experience. And I mean, a lot of dedicated athletes, we go very hard, very quick, and we become very goal focused and goal orientated. Now, that's really natural, that's really normal to happen. Like, sometimes you need to go too far to come back and find your balance in running, of where you're happiest at and where you're most comfortable at. So, you know, it's things like, and that's why I'm really talking about stress management, but having the crack, having fun, relaxing. You know, there's no harm in, you know, going for a swim, or, you know, going to a theme park, or playing some crazy golf, or whatever you like to do, or read a book, you know, or whatever it is. And we know that with COVID-19, it has caused a lot of stress. So people's menstrual cycle experience has actually become a little bit harder to navigate. And again, that can really be mediated with really good friends, you know, a really good home cooked meal, just creating space that you feel comfortable, so you can really allow your body to relax. And that's something that we don't really get the opportunity to do, especially within COVID. You know, it is hard to relax. But that is, again, very normal and very natural. They were two of the main questions that I wanted to comment on. Again, if you have any further questions, I would be more than delighted. If you wanted to contact me, I would be happy to reply to them. So, I mean, again, I'll pop my details down in the show notes, but it's just orna@yourhealthpsychology.ie. And really, I suppose what thought would I like to leave you with before you go on your way? And again, I really appreciate your time. But I do think the menstrual cycle, if I can kind of compare it to something like mental health, like 20 or 30 years ago, mental health wasn't a conversation that was happening. It was awkward. There was a little bit of stigma involved, and it wasn't something that we would discuss in the workplace or in sport or anything like that. Menstrual cycle is kind of similar, and I really hope that in like 2 or 3 years' time, because it's picking up momentum, and athletes don't care. Like, athletes are looking for the best way to get the most out of themselves. But in 2 or 3 years' time, like, I really want the menstrual cycle to be kind of like heart rate, you know. So if you go and you turn up and your coach asks you, you know, how are you feeling? How's your heart rate? You know, are you okay in your body? You know, like, it's something that's really normal, and I hope that's where it's going, and I think that it is. But yeah, I really want to thank you for listening in today, and hopefully I will hear from some of you soon. Okay, bye bye.